speak to your doctor at your local AHEPA chapter.
And these service dogs are actually trained rescue dogs. We're saving one life to save another. These service dogs are actually saving one life to save another.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for EMBCA's Order of AHEPA, a Century of Service to America and Hellenism panel discussion in association with AHEPA and AHEPA's National Hellenic Cultural Commission. My name is Lou Katsos, EMBCA's president and AHEPA National Cultural Commission chairman, and I will be moderating today's panel discussion. Our distinguished panel includes Rhode Island State Senator Lou Raptakis, AHEPA Supreme President Jimmy Kokotas, AHEPA Executive Director Basil Mossaides, historian, author, Professor Alexander Kitroeff of Haverford College, and author-poet Nicholas Alexiou, Professor of Sociology and Director of the Hellenic American Project at Queens College. Before we start our discussion and presentations, I'd like to introduce AHEPA's Executive Director, Basil Mossaides. Basil is the Executive Director of AHEPA and is a 3-decade member who has served voluntarily the organization at the chapter, district, and national levels. He has served as AHEPA's Executive Director since 2003. He is a first-generation Hellenic American, born to Pontian Hellenic parents that immigrated to the United States in the 1950s. He holds a dual degree in history and political science from Eastern College. Basil is also invested as an archon in the Order of St. Andrew, the Apostle of the Holy Ecumenical Patriarchate. This is the highest lay award presented within the Orthodox Church. Welcome, Basil, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Brother Lou, and I'd like to meet the person that you introduced because it's pretty impressive credentials there, huh?
You're an impressive guy, man. You're an impressive guy.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and it is indeed an honor to be able to communicate with you and your audience today. I would like to start by talking very briefly and apologizing to you that I'm in Florida. As you know, this year our 100th anniversary is in Orlando, Florida, July 17th to the 23rd. And I will defer to our Supreme President to go over the program details as far as what our political and other agendas are. But I'm down here in Florida making final preparations for the convention. We expect 1,500 to 2,000 people to come celebrate our 100th anniversary. It's going to be really something very spectacular. The Walt Disney World Company has gone to very, very long lengths to assist us in programming a convention which everyone will never forget. After our resounding successful convention in Athens last year, which despite the COVID pandemic and the restrictions, we had a huge turnout. And I thought with the president of Cyprus, the prime minister of Greece, and all the government officials that attended our banquet, it was a smashing success. So we set the bar pretty high last year, and we're looking forward to exceeding that bar this year. Because of my meetings here with the hotel and with the different local committees, I'm unfortunately unable to stay with you the whole time. So I appreciate you putting me up front. Our organization, as you know, for 100 years has been the premier organization, a trailblazing organization that set the standard for what Greek America means today. Our protopapoudes that came before the creation of this organization laid such a groundwork and had such vision for our organization to be established. And it's not a coincidence, really, if you look back historically, and I'm sure Professor Kitroeff can get into that historical perspective better than I could. But why did the AHEPA and the Greek Orthodox Church both simultaneously come out of sort of an unorganized diaspora in the United States in 1922? Well, if we can probably make a claim that in 1922, with the destruction of Smyrna and the retaliation of the Turkish nation towards the Greeks, there was a general feeling of we got to do something. You know, we have to sort of represent and bind together to help the new wave of immigrants coming to the United States, and if any possible assistance we could afford the Greeks over there. So in July of 1922, July 26, 1922, 8 founding members created a national organization, which is really a very interesting way to organize something. Most people would start something in their communities, and then it would grow, and then eventually the national organization would sort of develop. This was created instantaneously as a national organization, the 8 founding members, the first Supreme Lodge, and then their mandate was to start creating chapters everywhere across the United States. It was a very novel way of having an organization sort of take root. And July 26 was the first meeting. By the end of August, the beginning of September, they created the first chapter, which all of those individuals became members of. That was in Atlanta, Georgia. And then the second chapter was created in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1922. And then finally, the third chapter created in 1922 was created in late November, I believe, in Birmingham, Alabama. So there were pockets of people in our communities that saw the need for our organization to be developed. And if you look back at our historical documents, you can see this spreading of these chapters everywhere throughout the United States, eventually into Canada, eventually into Australia, and of course, in modern day Europe. So this need, this emptiness of an ethnicity to have some kind of connection to an organization was filled by the AHEPA. So I believe that our founding fathers had a remarkable vision and created, in effect, the most authentic, the most historic, and the most relevant organization of its kind throughout the 20th century. The chapters served their communities. They built the original 300 and some churches across the United States in cooperation with the Archbishop in the United States and, of course, the Patriarch in Constantinople. And then it transitioned during the Second World War, it transitioned into the only Greek-American organization. One of our past presidents, George Vornas, was a major in the OSS during World War II, very close friend to Franklin Roosevelt. And when I first started working for AHEPA in 1990, George would come to the office and we would go to lunch. And he was in the twilight of his years, but his stories were repetitive, of course. I mean, he was an elderly gentleman, but he was something else to me. He impressed me with all of his knowledge of how the United States worked and how the AHEPA performed the functions that it performed. Some information is public, other information is still secretive. George himself created the opportunity for all of our sons of Pericles during World War II to find their way into national service in the armed forces, whether as spies behind enemy lines or infantrymen on the front lines or whatever. There were thousands of young kids that joined the army and they went through the AHEPA. I mean, George Vornas, to find key important positions in the government. In the year 2000, we honored the living OSS members and all of the veterans actually in Washington, D.C., when we honored our veterans. And we have some videotape of interviews from those individuals, Spiro Capone, I'm sure many of you know that individual, performed some outstanding heroic work that has still been labeled as classified. So it's not public domain. But in the 40s and the 50s, we helped the United States through their time of struggle. We helped with the Marshall Plan. We helped collect food, money, blankets for Greece. In the 60s, we started helping St. Basil's Academy. So our history is certainly written, and people, if they want, can look at what we did as an organization. And it's just an unbelievable, rich tradition. We're very excited that Professor Kitroeff is finalizing the 100th anniversary book, which will be ready by our convention in Orlando. We want to thank him for all his investigative work. And, I really don't have enough time to get into every program that AHEPA has done that's turned out to be such a successful project. And it's certainly been an honor for me to be able to play a small role, first as a Sons of Pericles Supreme President, and then later in my capacity now. But the AHEPA, its strength is not its office in Washington, D.C. It's our member, the everyday member who donates time, he donates money to the vision and to the purpose of the AHEPA. So as an AHEPan, I'm very, very proud of my membership. As a Greek American, I'm extremely proud of the hard work that the AHEPA has done these last 100 years. But I can talk about this forever, Lou. If you have any pointed individual questions that you'd like for me to answer, I'd be glad to do that. Certainly our Supreme President is in a position to answer all those, as well as he is our spokesman. But I'm humbled at the opportunity to be able to address your audience today.
No, thank you, brother Basil. We're going to have an open discussion after we make some individual presentations. But I will say something relating to what you stated. Okay, within the last week and a half, I received the family archives of George Vournas. Mm-hmm. In other words, his family actually gave me the archives, which are pretty substantial. And we will have that discussion, obviously, with yourself, with our Supreme President, as well as Professor Kitroeff. And I'll talk a little bit further about that later. What I would like to do now is, before I introduce AHEPA's Supreme President, I would like to say a few words or a little introduction regarding AHEPA. Established on July 26, 1922 in Atlanta, Georgia, the Fraternal Order of AHEPA, American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association, was founded by 8 visionary Hellenic immigrants to help unify, organize, and protect against bigotry, discrimination, and defamation faced by people of all ethnic, racial, and religious backgrounds, and perpetrated predominantly by the nativist Ku Klux Klan. In the beginning, besides the horrid effects of xenophobia, AHEPA also sought to unite the Hellenic Americans after the political Venizelos Vasilias schism that had left Hellenes divided amongst each other. The charter of the organization stated that the fraternal order would promote, quote, pure and undefiled Americanism among the Greeks of the United States, and instill the deepest loyalty and allegiance of the Greeks of this country to the United States of America. AHEPA sought to bring Hellenes into the American way of life by establishing better relations with non-Hellenes. It was a response to a, quote, campaign of extermination, end quote, orchestrated by the repugnant and resurgent Klan, and in Atlanta, home of the imperial palace of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. At the time, the newly organized KKK national-wide anti-Hellenism offensive of the early 1920s featured boycotts of Hellenic merchants amid incidents of anti-Hellenic documented violence from Miami to Spokane. At the U.S. elections in the 1920s, Klansmen handed out cards that crudely and defiantly declared, quote, when cotton grows on the fig tree and alfalfa hangs on the rose, when the aliens run the United States and the Jews grow a straight nose, when the Pope is praised by everyone in the land of Uncle Sam and a Greek is elected president, then the Ku Klux Klan won't be worth a damn. Storefronts had signs stating, no rats, no Greeks, all American. Hellenic men were flogged for dating white women, assaulted for stealing American jobs, and abducted by Klansmen to witness lynching parties where they were beaten in order to get out of town. Hellenic Americans were barred from, quote, white man's jobs and from, quote, white man's towns in many parts of the West, while Hellenic storefronts shut down throughout most of the Southeast was caused by that. From its inception, AHEPA has embraced a program of nonviolence, social engagement, political outreach, and a formulation of a quintessential American Hellenism. AHEPA is the largest and oldest grassroots association of American citizens of Hellenic heritage and Phil-Hellenes, and the most influential organization, non-religious organization with more than 400 chapters across the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe. The stated mission of AHEPA is to promote the ancient Hellenic ideals of education, philanthropy, civil responsibility, family and individual excellence through community service and volunteerism. An important component of AHEPA's mission from the beginning was to amplify an awareness of the principles of Hellenism to society, principles which have been universal in Western society and civilization, and something to strive for and related to a commitment to humanity, freedom, and democracy. AHEPA has instilled in its members an understanding of this Hellenic heritage to both Hellenes and Phil-Hellenes, and of the contributions made by Greece to the development of democratic principles and governance in the United States and throughout the world. Since 1922, AHEPA has contributed over $1 billion to worthy causes and has contributed and donated $1 million to St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, a national shrine, which is nearing completion. This year, AHEPA, on its 100th anniversary, will be one of the honorees in the Greek Independence Parade in New York City, the largest Hellenic Independence Day parade in the world. AHEPA is a fraternity, nonpartisan, non-political, non-sectarian, and over the years has initiated more than 300,000 members. Besides Hellenic Americans, it has many non-Hellenic members, judges, mayors, congressmen and congresswomen, senators, governors, and other prominent non-Hellenic citizens who belong and have belonged to AHEPA. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was initiated into the Delphi Chapter 25 on March 13, 1931, while he was the New York State governor and was an active dues-paying member for 14 years at the time of his death. President Truman, Harry Truman, was also a member of AHEPA, and in his case of Chapter 73 in Kansas City, and joined AHEPA on March 25th, Independence Day, Hellenic Independence Day, in 1946 at ceremonies held at the White House. With that, I'd like to introduce, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce AHEPA's Supreme President, Jimmy Kokotas, who I believe right now is in Jacksonville. Jimmy Kokotas, Brother Kokotas, is the AHEPA Supreme President, the largest, as we indicated before, and oldest grassroots association of American citizens of Greek heritage and Phil-Hellenes with more than 400 chapters around the world. He has served voluntarily in the AHEPA organization in the chapter level, the district level, and national levels for decades. His mission, and its mission, to promote the ancient Hellenic ideals of education, philanthropy, civic responsibility, family and individual excellence through community service and volunteerism is something he takes personally. And he is one of the finest examples of that by his multi-decade actions throughout the nation and the world. Jimmy is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and owner of the famous and iconic Tom's Restaurants. He is a graduate of Brooklyn Tech, where I also graduated, and Brooklyn College. He is also an invested archon in the order of St. Andrew, the Apostle of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, the highest lay award presented within the Orthodox Church. Welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you, Brother Lou. Thank you, Brother Lou. Thank you, Dr. Kitroeff, Dr. Alexiou, and to all the other panelists. Thank you, Lou, for the work you do for us with these lectures as chairman of the Hellenic Cultural Commission, for educating us, for reminding us of things of importance, and for bringing things to our attention that we otherwise probably would have never thought of with these series. You really pique the interest of many topics that I know are near and dear to your heart, but you've done a great job in educating us in many different aspects of the Greek diaspora, whether it's music and Johnny Otis or different other Hellenic issues and history moments in history. And we thank you for that. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be representing this wonderful organization as we get ready to celebrate our 100-year anniversary. You said a lot. Basil said a lot. Dr. Kitroeff will fill in all the blanks. I think one of the important things to talk about this wonderful organization is the ethos of it, of service, of helping in any way that it possibly can, how it brought people together 100 years ago, the vision that those 8 founders had, the inclusiveness of the organization where a prominent lawyer, a doctor, and a restaurant person like myself could sit down as equals in our quest, in our desire to help. With a passion to make a difference, to help change the world in any way we could. At that time, obviously, we were trying to help Greeks assimilate to the States and become more Americanized, helping them in the fight against the Klan as they were being discriminated against. And from there, it just continued and it grew, and service veered off and grew into so many different branches on that tree of service to the world, to our society, and to the diaspora. One of the things that's not talked about too often about this organization is not only its inclusivity, but the value it placed on the importance of family. If you think about it, AHEPA 1922, it was only a few years later that the Daughters of Penelope were established. And only a few years later after that the Sons of Pericles and Maids of Athena were established. And that idea of family, the respect that these brothers and these visionaries had for women. And that was not common in society. But again, as Greeks, we knew that we would not get too far without our wives, without our sisters, without our mothers, without our daughters. And with that respect, the Daughters of Penelope came out of this organization, and the junior orders came out of it. And part of that was definitely to help in the fight and the strength in numbers, and how we were always working towards inviting everybody in who wanted to make a difference. And again, our success has been built on the passion of people to help. From the 20s and the 30s, the war bonds in World War II, over $300 million worth, the over $1 billion of service. And we continue to hear of the little tidbits I learned something this weekend. Somebody pointed out to me, and maybe Dr. Kitroeff knew this already, I did not. In 1938, the Sons of Pericles' national project was to translate the Greek liturgy into English. Okay, the Sons of Pericles did that in 1938 as a national project. They brought in the proper people that could help do that, and they were the first ones to translate the Greek liturgy into English. So this, and on my trip that I was just in Greece, got back a couple of weeks ago, when we talked about the Thessaloniki Hospital and the AHEPA hospital there and everything else, Gustav Arsamis, the district governor, pointed out the stories that he's heard and have been verified to him, how many of the local, regional, smaller hospitals were started by AHEPAns that came to America, and these were their choria. And they knew the need of a hospital because they were so far away from the major hospitals. And so many smaller hospitals were also established by Greeks. And this is not documented everywhere. And probably Dr. Kitroeff has some of that information, but there's so much of it that's been lost. And as Basil said about the OSS and so many people, military people, veterans, I've heard so many stories through the years. And one of the things, unfortunately, is I think the chapters weren't documenting a lot of this stuff and they were taking it for granted. We were just in Chicago and we honored a bunch of brothers, a 77-year past Supreme President, a 75-year member of the organization. And I spoke there and I pointed out that these brothers that we're honoring, that have been members, Sons of Pericles and AHEPA for 77 years, were in the middle part. They still weren't at the beginning part. How many brothers and sisters of this organization, of this family, contributed so greatly years ago, in those founding years, in those difficult years, where it wasn't that fashionable to be Greek, it wasn't that fashionable to start an organization like this, especially, it wasn't only the clan, probably there were a bunch of other people that were challenged, seeing a group, an ethnic group from another country, all of a sudden gaining strength, gaining steam, building churches, starting communities, really planting their roots into the fabric of America. And how many other people were probably challenged by that, but then they saw that we were not here to flex muscle or to take advantage of situations or to do anything that might have threatened them. We were only here to help our own and help this country as well. And I think we proved a lot of that during World War II with the war bond sales. We proved what great Americans Greeks could make, and the loyalty and the love that they felt for this country so early on in their existence here, that they adopted this country as their own, with a deep love. And again, no other organization like ours came anywhere close to that $350 million number of war bonds. It's just so special, what's been done, what continues to be done. And as Basil said earlier, I've said this all over the country when I've spoken, the strength of our organization is the chapters, it's the individual members, it's their desire to make a difference. It is not a coincidence that the Archdiocese and the Order of AHEPA began the same time. I think this organization, this is my personal belief, this organization allowed all those good Orthodox Christians to put their faith to work and to test. As they say, faith without works would be dead. This was the organization that welcomed everybody in and said, if you want to make a difference, if you want to put in some work, join us, help us, let's make a difference in the lives of our fellow Greeks, our fellow Greek Americans, and help our homeland. So being the preeminent organization 100 years ago, look at what was done. I think, again, Dr. Kitroeff will verify things, but anywhere between half and 2/3 to 3/4 of the churches in America today, AHEPans have played a role in. Whether they were the people that bought the property, helped build the church, gathered the money, whatever it was, they've been involved. The respect that this organization has garnered from the church through the years is also impressive. The church has been more than willing to show to the diaspora and to the churches and to the members of the parishes the significance of AHEPA by having the third Sunday of every May be AHEPA Sunday in all of the churches throughout America. His All Holiness welcoming us to the Patriarchate, to the Fanar, with open arms. Being honored by us on his recent visit to the States. It's a special relationship. It's a relationship based on love and respect. And I truly believe common interest and common passion to help, to serve, to promote, to preserve those values for future generations, and to make sure that our children or our grandchildren and future generations are able to experience what we experienced growing up, what our grandparents experienced. The world continues to change. I don't need to point that out. Look what's going on in the world with the wars, with everything else happening. Our values and our message has not changed. It's not one of that goes in and out of fashion. Those values have withstood the test of time. It's not the bell bottoms that came in and out and came back again. And these are the values that we are fighting to preserve, to promote, to protect, and to share with the world. I know that it was stated in the video there earlier how we are interwoven into kind of the Greek American fabric. I'll take it a step further, and I'll say that we've helped to weave the Greek American fabric, and that Greece has helped weave the fabric of America and that American flag with everything they've done through the history, with whether it was democracy, medicine, science, and everything else that they've given us, the philosophers, and how important that was. Just a couple of months ago, I was educated again when we celebrated Dr. King's birthday, and to know what role the Greeks and the Romans and the history the ancient Greeks and Romans played in his education and his belief system of causing good trouble with his peaceful rallies and gathering people together. We are so honored to come from such a rich history, a history that has given so much to the world and to society. And again, to know that somebody like Dr. King was influenced and had a vision of what it would be like to have lived in ancient Greece amongst those great minds is inspiring. Lou, for me, just like for yourself, we've got the passion. The people on the panel today have the passion. What this organization is trying to do and working with our churches and our communities and anybody else out there that's willing to work with us is to help instill that passion into our children, because it is that passion that has sustained us through all these difficult times that we've faced as Greeks. I believe it is that passion for faith and for freedom and for family that sustained the Greeks through the almost 400 years of Ottoman occupation. It is what sustained us as a country in 1940 with the famous Oshi, when other people were waving the white flag. We as Greeks took nothing for granted. And because of the passion for our faith and for our freedom and for our families and for their futures, we fought the Germans. And again, if what the ancient Greeks gave is forgotten, okay, so be it. If the 400 years under Turkish occupation is forgotten, so be it. But 82 years ago, we changed the world, and everybody living today is living a different and better life because of those Greeks of 1940, because we know what their fight did in terms of changing the direction of the war and the outcome of it. So I as Basil, and as I'm sure everybody else here can speak for hours on this, because we love it, we believe it, we feel it. I don't want to take up too much of the time, since we'll be taking some questions and everything later on. And I obviously didn't touch upon a tenth of the stuff that I could touch upon. I'm just happy to be here, and I thank all of you today for your participation and for the passion that you all have and share with us and share with this organization, and look forward to helping to spread that passion and that guiding light to our future generations to come, so that they can also pass it along and feel what it was like to carry that wonderful torch that we all have been fortunate to carry in one way or another. So thank you very much, Brother Lou, and to all the panelists.
Thank you, Brother Jimmy. Yesterday, March the 12th, marked the 75th anniversary of the Truman Doctrine. On 1947, President Harry Truman presented an address before the joint session of Congress, and his message became known as the Truman Doctrine. He asked Congress for $400 million in military and economic assistance for Greece and Turkey. And this doctrine and what is the related domino theory would guide U.S. foreign policy around the world for the next 40 years. President Truman, a member of AHEPA, declared, quote, "It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples and who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by pressures or by outside pressures." We're honored today to have Rhode Island Senator Lou Raptakis, who's an AHEPA member, along with State Senator Stephen Pappas from Wyoming, State Representative Nicole Claridis, and State Representatives Stephen Malagati, all AHEPA members. I don't want to introduce you, Lou, because I'll spend a half hour introducing you and the rest of the panel. But thank you for being here. We understand you're in Athens right now, and all of you have to go to a particular event. So if you can, please introduce yourselves and the other panelists and speak on the topic of the Truman Doctrine and AHEPA.
Lou, thank you very much. We also have Senator Andreas Boreas from California. Okay. So we have 5 members, but we're in Thessaloniki at a port conference that's going to start tomorrow. It's 2 days. But what better anniversary is the 100th anniversary of AHEPA and the 75th anniversary of the Truman Doctrine. We love both the doctrine that was passed and, as you know, AHEPA. And plus, we celebrated the 70th anniversary on the Lost Liberty, which AHEPA pioneered and helped us to bring that ship back to Greece.
We had a great
back-
event. We had a great event with Ambassador Pyatt at the time. It was a great
That's
event.
right.
Thank you.
That's right. But I just want to say to everybody, my fellow AHEPA brothers, happy anniversary. I'm proud to be here with you today, even though we're a few thousand miles away. But most important, before I pass the torch over to my colleague in government, Stephen Pappas from Wyoming, it's very important that we don't forget the Truman Doctrine. Look what is happening 600 miles away where we are in the port city of Thessaloniki, a complete tragedy. And regrettably, I'm glad that the United States, many AHEPAs in 1947, helped shepherd that important legislation, the doctrine, by contacting and working together with their members of Congress. I think that's what we're going to do today, too, which is most important. And after Stephen, we're going to have Representative Nicole Clarides Ditria, whose sister, 22 years elected in the Connecticut House, Themis Clarides, who's the first woman leader, is running for the U.S. Senate. And that's going to be a pretty close race because Connecticut is evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats. But we could have another female of Hellenic origin in the U.S. Senate. But I'll wrap it up here and I'll pass on the microphone to my colleague.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I too want to wish all my brothers happy anniversary for 100 years. I'm a proud AHEPA, joined in 1975 in Arizona. Now I'm in Wyoming, chapter 211, Cowboy chapter, and we do great work out in Wyoming. And I just am proud to be an AHEPA and to provide the services, the service back to our communities, to our churches, to our fellow man, as you mentioned, as you all mentioned earlier. Thank you so much. We look forward to great relations with AHEPA and PADEA. I think we can synergistically do a lot of good things for the Hellenes all around the world. So thank you so much. Glad to be with you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Representative Nicole Clarides Ditria. Hello to all the AHEPAs. I want to thank you for the great work you do on behalf of the AHEPA. The anniversary of the Truman Doctrine is something to be very proud of. We're celebrating here in Thessaloniki today, and we're here for the next couple of days, so that's wonderful. I've been in the State House in Connecticut for the last 6 years, and hopefully I'll run in November for another 2. Like Lou said, my sister's running for Congress, so hopefully we'll have another Greek up in Congress this coming year. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. And I'm Representative Steve Malagari from Pennsylvania. Brother Basil, great to see you here again today. President Kokotas, wonderful meeting you virtually. And Brother Lou, nice to see you as well. It's a pleasure to be here, one, to be in Thessaloniki, but also to be one of the legislators as well as part of WIA and PADEA. I wanted to just express my gratitude and my congratulations on the anniversary of AHEPA. I'm a member of the chapter in Valley Forge, where I live in Pennsylvania. And it's great to see the progress that has been occurring over the past 100 years. And I look forward to being able to work with each and every one of you a little bit further with the mission and the goals of AHEPA, and continuing our work together on the legislative end where we are, along with AHEPA in fellowship and brothership and brotherhood to continue forward. So, and we'll be working with our senators, my senators actually, Casey and Toomey as well, to push forward for Greece and continuing that relationship. So I appreciate being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Lou, thank you very much, and to all my brother AHEPAs.
Wait a
Again,
second, you put on the mask, Lou? You put on the mask now?
I'm sitting next now. I've got it off.
I thought you were a bandit or something. I thought you were going to rob us.
No. So as you know, Lou, we got 43 elected Hellenes in the United States, 6 members of Congress, 2 lieutenant governors, one the Secretary of State in Vermont, 17 state senators, and the balance state representatives in 20 states. So that's a powerful organization what we put together, and I think it sends a strong message working with our colleagues in government to push all our issues. And thank you very much to everybody. Lou, thank you for the opportunity.
Lou, thanks so much. And we're going to have, of course, the parade down Fifth Avenue again this year, a little bit later. It's going to, one of the honorees is obviously AHEPA and also the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese based on their 100th year anniversary. We're going to honor, of course, or commemorate the 100th anniversary of the burning of Smyrna. A little bit late, but the 200th anniversary of the Hellenic Revolution, and also the 2,500 year anniversary of the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of Salamis, and the Battle of Plataea. We're going to invite every Hellenic American politician in the United States of America. And Lou, we expect you to lead them there down Fifth Avenue.
Absolutely. Lou, and don't forget, it's the 100th anniversary of the Pontiac genocide. They have a mini conference tomorrow. We are going to get the mayor, Kostandakos, to come to the United States for May 19th.
Very good. And
Thank
of course,
you.
we'll do something in Lower Manhattan. And we're going to invite you, obviously, in Lower Manhattan at Battery Park area when we do the formal commemoration for the Pontians. Thank you again, Lou, and have a great evening. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Our next panelist, a good friend of ours, is Professor Nicholas Alexiou. Nicholas Alexiou was born in Volos, Greece, where he studied economics. He has received an MA degree from the Sociology Department at Queens College and a PhD also from the Sociology Department at the Graduate Center of CUNY, or the City University of New York. He has taught in the Department of Sociology at Queens College since 1990 and has received a President's Award for Excellence in Teaching. His fields of interest are social and political sociology, ethnic studies, and research. He has established the first archive, library, museum for the Greeks of New York, and he is the Director of Research of the Hellenic American Project at Queens College. Also, he's a contemporary poet. He is the author of 6 books of poetry, and many of his poems have been published in Greek and American journals and anthologies. He is a member of the Greek Authors Association in Greece and the Greek American Writers Guild in Association in New York. Well, welcome, Nico, and great to have you here today. And also, he's a member of Delphi Chapter 25.
Yes. Thank you, Lou, for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here among such a distinguished panel, to see old friends and meet new ones, and also to congratulate for the 100th anniversary of AHEPA. Of course, I was very pleased to hear that you received the Vournas archives, and maybe you can think also of HUB, because today, coincidentally, my presentation is what we have as an archive at Queens College and the Hellenic American Project. So, Costa, if you're ready, you can. Coincidentally, my presentation is what we have as an archive at Queens College and the Hellenic American Project. So, Costa, if you're ready, you can. Coincidentally, my presentation is what we have as an archive at Queens College and the Hellenic American Project. So, Costa, if you're ready, you can. Coincidentally, my presentation is what something's wrong. What we have as an archive at Queens College, and I think something's wrong.
You don't see the presentation?
No, we saw it a second ago, Costa. I'm not sure what happened.
But
go ahead. You want to try again? Costa?
We hear repetitions. Yeah, I think something's wrong.
You don't see the presentation?
Go on. Continue with the slides, please. So what we do actually here is to collect archives along with oral histories and other things. And of course, To digitize them is one of our priorities. We offer access to scholars, to students of all disciplines, and to the general public. Of course, technology is very supportive in our days, and you can use technology in order to create a multimedia environment. Here at the Hellenic American Project, we aim to enrich historical, cultural, and social awareness, as well as the collective memory of ethnic groups and the Hellenes, the Greek Americans, the Americans of Greek descent, of course. For collection that contains very fragile originals and prototypes, we have achieved a collaboration with the Queen's College Benjamin Rosenthal Library in the special collections, and this is, I think, one of the great achievements. One of the things that we host at the Hellenic American Project, it is the Constitution of AHEPA. And you can see I found it a few years ago in Greece, actually. And we managed to buy it and to have it in a display case in the part that we use as a museum at the Hellenic American Project. If you can see some of the pages there, very interesting to see the Constitution. The next slide, Costa, please. So this is the opening of the Constitution. Part of it was mentioned by Lou earlier. We, American citizens of Hellenic descent, desiring to form, institute, and perpetuate a fraternal order. So this is the very first paragraph that exists in the Constitution founded in 1922, in July 26. The next slide, Costa, we see more pages of that, the various articles where they describe more of the goals and the aims of the association. In continuing, we see the founders, as was mentioned earlier, also by Basil, who mentioned the 8 founding members, Nicholas Chotas, James Campbell, Harry Angelopoulos Stamos, Paulos, John Angelopoulos as the Supreme Governor, and George Campbell and James Vlas. So they were the 8 people who started it, and they call the first meeting, the first chapter, as the Mother Lodge. In the next one, we see another book that we have in our archives, and we displayed also in our space at Queen's College, the Secret Rituals, which I found it very, very interesting, because I'm not sure if the AHEPA still uses some or has some of the rituals, but it's very interesting to see some of the rituals there, or the secret codes of the fraternity. A very interesting also source. In continuing, I'm going to see the next one. Costa, let's move to the next one, please. Descriptions of the initiation, the procedure of initiation. And in the next page, we're going to see something very interesting also. Let's go to the next pages. Here, in a handwritten format, we have the name of a person who got initiated in 1941, Stanley Petropoulos from Arizona, in December 17, 1941. And I think this is a very interesting document to see the date of the initiation of this particular person. Other things that we host at the Hellenic American Project regarding AHEPA is, besides the magazine, of course, if we go to the next one, Costa, we see this photograph which is the initiation of a very well-known Hellenic American, John Cassavetes. And this particular photograph, it is a donation from George Zouvelos from the Hermes chapter 186. And I think this is the icing on the cake for the artifacts we have. Also, in the next one, there is in collaboration with the Queen's College Library, I found this Greek American newspaper, the Chicago Pnyx, where there is a report from about Georgia and the anti-immigrant laws that some legislators there, they wanted to exclude all ethnic groups from running for public office. And the Greek American reported that. And not only reported that to the papers, also the New York Times covered it, but he sent a letter to the AHEPA in order to take some kind of action. And in the next slide, you're going to see the report that discrimination is an ugly word. Actually, in one of the newsletters of Hellenic American Project on November of 2020, we covered that story, showing the paper clipping we had and the letter. In the next one, we see the first response by the AHEPA members, congratulating the reporter who said that, who reported the news about discriminating against all immigrants, and that a promise that AHEPA will take care. In following that, there was a letter and a strong mobilization by AHEPA's part to stop this anti-immigrant legislation in Georgia in 1949. Finally, another artifact we have, there is a book, although in electronic form, of the 50th anniversary of AHEPA. So I'm very pleased that I am part of this panel today celebrating the 100th anniversary, but this is a book that celebrates the 50th anniversary, and I hope we all meet again and after 50 years and we still celebrate the 150th anniversary. So you see, it is an interesting book because not only describes in detail all the members, but is divided also in different decades and being more specific about the various projects, the various donations or philanthropic gestures that and campaigns that AHEPA undertook. Also, reading in more depth, we realized the various political positions that AHEPA had in different times, either if that was during the MacArthur era, the Red Scare, the position of women, the military junta in Greece, etc. So it's also aspects of political activities or ideological aspects regarding AHEPA until the 1970s. We're waiting for the new book by my dear friend Alexander Kitroeff to see the next 50 years after 1972 in this book. And I think that by archiving AHEPA and displaying AHEPA, especially when until before the pandemic, various high schools and QC students visited the area, they had a chance to see what is AHEPA about, because it's not very well known among the later generation, and also have a chance to make them familiar with this particular organization of the Greek American community and its contribution to the American society in general. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nico, for that. And I also have a copy, by the way, which is a classic, Leber's 50 years history of AHEPA, which is fascinating, quite frankly, to read that particular book. Thank you again, Nico. I'd like now to introduce Professor Alexander Kitroeff. Professor Kitroeff's research and publishing focuses on nationalism and ethnicity in modern Greece and its diaspora, and its manifestations across a broad spectrum, from politics to sports. His numerous publications includes the Greeks of Egypt, Griegos en America, Wrestling with the Ancients, Modern Greek Identity in the Olympics, Elas Evropi Panathenaikos, 100 χρόνια Ελληνική Ιστορία, the Greeks and the Making of Modern Egypt, the Greek Orthodox Church in America, Modern History. And his future book that was indicated before includes a history of AHEPA, the 100 years, which is coming out shortly, and which will appear in, obviously, the 100th anniversary before the convention that was mentioned earlier by Basil in this year. And he's also working on a history of Greek Americans and diner restaurants. He has continued his collaboration with various film directors, including Maria Iliou, with who he has served as the principal historical consultant in 4 documentaries: The Journey, The Greek Dream in America in 2007, Smyrna, 1922, and this is also the 100th anniversary, of course, of the burning of Smyrna. So Smyrna, 1922, The Destruction of a Cosmopolitan City, which came out in 2012. From both sides of the Aegean, Expulsions and Population Exchange, Turkey, Greece, 1922 to 1924, which came out in 2013, and various other works. I think that the current project, I don't know if it's historical yet, meaning that it happened, is a 5-part history of the city of Athens from 1821 to the present. I believe part 1 is called Athens Between East and West, 1821 to 1896. And it premiered, right, Alexander? I think it premiered already at the Benaki Museum in Athens. Welcome, and thank you. And I should mention that, and by the way, he's due many, many honors. He was honored recently by the by Leadership 100, and you deserve every honor that you get. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you so much. Lou, thank you for the invitation. A pleasure to be with you, with Supreme President Jimmy Kokotas, Executive Director Basil, Mossaides, the legislators, and my colleague Nico Alexiou. Thank you. That was these introductions get too long. What I want to do is talk about the project, the writing the book about the 100 years of AHEPA, and share some preliminary findings of mine. Let me say, I'm a student of the Greek experience in America, and as the 100th anniversary was approaching, I realized nothing much, aside from the Liber book, nothing much has been written about AHEPA. So I kind of volunteered to write this history, and the order's been very generous in opening up its archives in Washington, D.C., which are the minutes of the conventions, the magazines, and the yearbooks. The Order of AHEPA also has its own archives. It sent a big chunk of the archives to the University of Minnesota, where there are several important Greek American archives there, including those of Theodore Saloutos, who wrote that book on the Greeks in the United States, which came out in 1964. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to that archive because it was closed due to COVID. But just as well, because there is so much to write about AHEPA. And basically, my book is going to be an overview And I'm hoping that it will kickstart a lot of the subsequent works on AHEPA. There's so much to write about, so many things to be focused and produced that specific aspects of AHEPA's work need to be done. And so the book's only going to be an overview. It's great that Nico Alexiou has got those archives in New York. That's one of the venues that students can go to. Here are my findings in the summary. I really think I could characterize AHEPA's history as four main aspects. The first aspect is that AHEPA is very successful in adapting according to the changing circumstances, both in the United States and in Greece. And what I will do after I give my four main aspects is just go through the 10 decades, and that will be illustrated. In other words, just to give you one short example, AHEPA is extremely successful in its campaign to assimilate, to encourage Americans to assimilate, to take American citizenship and speak English. And then actually the Salutos book has the numbers of Greeks acquiring citizenship, encouraged by AHEPA. The curve is upward throughout the 1920s. And that's a success. It's due to AHEPA. And then AHEPA in the 1930s, 1940s is going to be finding new ways to become relevant and support the Greek American community. And we'll see these in a minute. The second thing is, and this is the most challenging thing about writing AHEPA's history, it is involved in so many projects. It's really, you mentioned the book I wrote about the Archdiocese. That was much easier to write because the Archdiocese has a more kind of, by definition, it's religion and education. So it's got a more focused, and the parameters are narrow. AHEPA's parameters are open, they're rich, they open up, and they continue to be broad. It's shaping US foreign policy in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's philanthropy. It's coolies anemia. It's educational programs. It's scholarships. It's aiding Greece during earthquake, in the aftermath of earthquakes. The programs just go on. And it's very difficult to keep track of this wonderfully rich and wide variety of initiatives. So that's the second thing, that AHEPA is kind of multiple activities, almost sometimes even coincidentally, which is extremely impressive. Basil used the expression "set the standard," and I think, yes, set the standard in the sense that many things that other Greek American organizations do were initiated by AHEPA. The trip to Greece, the first trip to Greece, was in 1927, and the scholarships are also initiated very early in AHEPA's history. And now all the other Greek American organizations, and they all due respect to the other Greek American organizations who contribute mightily as well to shaping Greek America, but all their programs can be found initially in the history of AHEPA. AHEPA is the initiator of all those programs. So in many ways, it set the standards. The Supreme President mentioned the relationship with Orthodoxy. I can't stress that. It's really quite impressive. It's not a coincidence that AHEPA is created in 1922, the same year as the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese is established. And it's not a coincidence that AHEPA members, we see the presidents of parish boards are also AHEPA members. People active in AHEPA are active in their local churches. It's really quite impressive. It's not immediately apparent because in the archives, and speaking as a historian, they either appear in the parish history or they appear in AHEPA. And then you look at the materials and you say, wait a minute, there's the same name appearing in the chapter and the parish. So here's the synergy. And but there's one more thing about AHEPA. It's not just its close synergy with the Orthodox Church. There have been several moments in AHEPA's history in which it's tried to collaborate with other Greek organizations. It's very open, it's sharing. There are several times AHEPA has tried to create a kind of Pan-American federation of organizations. It tried that in the 1940s. Sometimes it doesn't work because, well, let's not go into why the Greek Americans can't get involved in one big organization, but it's striking that AHEPA is always open. It's always, its doors are open. It's always reaching out to the other organizations. So these four aspects impressed me as I've gone through the history. It's adaptation, which is, of course, the classic characteristic, I think, and the successful aspect of the Greeks in the diaspora, that they adapt to their environment and succeed. The breadth of its activities, the setting the standard, doing things for the first time that everyone else then imitates, and its openness towards the Archdiocese and the other Greek American organizations. Now, let's go to the just a quick run through the 10 decades of America's history, and both Jimmy and Basil have mentioned the establishment and the creation of AHEPA, so I don't have to go into that. Impressive that it was a national organization, and the success, I mentioned before the rate of acquisition of Greeks acquiring US citizenship, which is a higher rate than many other European ethnic groups. The other thing is the way AHEPA mushrooms throughout the country. It's just striking. Those three chapters were mentioned in the beginning. You begin in Atlanta, Georgia, but within just a few years, AHEPA has acquired chapters throughout. From a historical point of view, if you see an organization developing at that particular rate, that tells us, the historians, that the organization comes at the right time. It speaks to existing needs, and it resonates with the rest of the community, and the community responds and joins AHEPA because it sees a real meaning. And even the depression of the 1930s doesn't really affect AHEPA very negatively. Some numbers go down. Some people obviously are not paying their dues, but AHEPA survives the 1930s very strongly, precisely because it's relating to the community needs. Having been so successful in the 1920s, what AHEPA does from the late 20s onwards, it reaches out to Greece. Now, if you read a lot of descriptions of AHEPA in general histories, they say, oh, the organization was obsessively involved in Americanization. And yes, there was a push towards Americanization. There was an emphasis on using English, and some people reacted to that. But the organization was very easily able to pivot at the late 20s. It organized excursions to Greece. The descriptions are in the Liber book. They're very interesting. The Greek newspapers also have descriptions of the red carpet treatment that AHEPA received. And throughout the 1930s, the ties with Greece become stronger, both with the continued annual excursions, but also with help and aid that AHEPA offers Greece. So already on the eve of World War II, we've got AHEPA balancing between Americanism and Hellenism, and that balance is going to continue throughout its history. Many people have told me, you know, AHEPA doesn't advertise all the good things it does. And maybe I see that, and maybe it's too busy doing things to advertise what it's doing. But this is really striking with the 1940s, because in the 1940s, we know that the Greek Americans organized the Greek War Relief Association, which was the organization which encouraged the Americans to buy the bonds that we've heard of and gather all the aid material for Greece. But the Greek War Relief Association was basically AHEPA. It was the AHEPA chapters throughout America that were helping, were really doing the boots on the ground work for AHEPA and gathering material. And there was even a discussion in one of the AHEPA conventions. There was a discussion, some people complained and said, look, we're doing all this work and the Greek War Relief Association is getting all the credit and kind of AHEPA's under the radar. But AHEPA's leadership believed that this wasn't the time to mess with an organization that had already been created. And AHEPA, in a sense, remained low profile, but all the posters talk about the Greek War Relief Association, and we hear about Spiros Skouras, and Skouras himself was an AHEPAN and is on record recognizing the fact that the Greek War Relief Association, which is one of the most important moments in Greek American history, because it shows again that the Greek Americans are both helping Greece and also helping the United States. The Greek War Relief Association is basically AHEPA, and that it is throughout the 1940s. And as we know, the Greek War Relief Association offers aid and aids in Greek post-war reconstruction. In the 1950s, there was as the post-war reconstruction was being, in a sense, successful and was taken over by international agencies, AHEPA looks to other programs. There is attention to two things. First of all, helping, there's a refugee relief committee that helps the numbers of Greeks who want to emigrate to the United States, and AHEPA plays an important and difficult role because it does get complicated, but it contributes mightily to the arrival of Greek refugees in the United States in the 1950s. And it is very active over the Cyprus question. As we know, on April 1st, 1955, the Cypriot organization EOKA begins the armed struggle to achieve Cyprus's union with Greece. And this is really the beginning of the Greek lobby, in a sense. We have the first examples of AHEPA trying to persuade Congress that the United States should be supporting the interests of the Greek Cypriots in the name of stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. AHEPA always works through US policy. It's not an organization that supports Greek foreign policy outright. It works through the interests of US foreign policy. It's mightily involved in the Cyprus issue throughout the 1950s. Cyprus will become independent in the 1960s, and as we know, the independence will bring new sets of problems. So AHEPA has been involved in the Cyprus struggle from the mid-1950s right through to the present. In the 1960s, the early 1960s, and this is not well known, there was a huge push by AHEPA. There was a turn towards education. The refugee relief program was shut down. There was a very active move towards education and the introduction of helping Byzantine and classical studies be introduced in US higher education. That was kind of taken up very strongly in the early 1960s and continues to be one of AHEPA's main concerns. In the 1970s, we come to 1974. 1974 is a pivotal year in modern Greek history. I would go major event years of modern Greek history: 1821, 1922, 1974 is very important. Unfortunately, it's got two sides to it. It's got the tragedy of the Turkish invasion and occupation of Cyprus, but on the other hand, it's got the transition to democracy, and in some ways, Greece from 1974 onwards acquires a kind of democratic culture. A lot of the divisions of the past are put aside. I know that we talk about Greek politics being polarized, but I think from 1974 onwards, we have a democratic polity that can absorb the tensions much better. In earlier years, we had Venizelists and royalists arguing among each other, and AHEPA was successful in keeping out of that conflict. Then we had the left versus right during the Cold War. In 1974 onwards, we have a democratic Greece, but we have AHEPA becoming again the backbone of the Greek-American lobby, which succeeded in persuading Congress to implement the Turkish arms embargo from January 1975 to the summer of 1978. Look at any American textbook on US foreign policy and the role of ethnic groups in shaping US foreign policy. The Turkish arms embargo of 1975 to 1978 is a case study in ethnic lobbying. It's a successful case study. And again, a lot of the accounts of the Greek-American lobby talk about the American Hellenic Institute and the wonderful work that Eugene Rosidis did. He was maybe the most savvy person in Washington, which led the struggle to persuade Congress to establish a rule of law policy in the Eastern Mediterranean. But the American Hellenic Institute was established with AHEPA's help, and the American Hellenic Institute operated again the way the Greek War Relief Association did. It operated thanks to the mobilization of AHEPA chapters throughout the United States. And AHEPA since then has become a very, very important force in Washington. The embargo was lifted in 1978, but the situation in Cyprus has continued, as have the conflicts in the Aegean, as have the issues faced by the Ecumenical Patriarchate. The lobby exists, and AHEPA remains the backbone of the Greek-American lobby in Washington, D.C. from that time onwards. I'll go quickly through the other decades, which I think you are more familiar with. The 1980s are a period of Americanization. The sociologist Charles Moskos has talked about how the Greek Americans are becoming more and more American. And in 1988, of course, we have the candidacy of Mike Dukakis he's the Democratic candidate in the presidential elections, and AHEPA plays an important supportive role in the Dukakis campaign, in which the entire community rallied. The AHEPA programs in the 1990s and the early 2000s is the example I spoke about, the second aspect of AHEPA. If you look at what AHEPA did in the 1990s and early 2000s, you can almost get a kind of archival motion sickness, because AHEPA is really involved in both helping natural disasters in the United States, natural disasters in Greece, philanthropy, coolies, anemia, other programs, US foreign policy, assisting Greece. It's really quite this amazing array of activities, which brings us, of course, to the 2008, 2009, with the financial crisis that strikes Greece. And for the rest of that decade, AHEPA will stand by the Greek people and assist the people suffering in the economic crisis, initially through its chapters in Greece and then through fundraising campaigns throughout the United States during the economic crisis. And then with the we have a coincidence, the end of the economic crisis comes in the, 2018, summer of 2019, when Jimmy Kokotas's predecessor, George Choriatis, is elected Supreme President at the Chicago Supreme Convention and calls for the AHEPA to defend Hellenism, if I can remember well his speech in Chicago. And that brings us to 2021, the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution. And AHEPA is the only major Greek American organization to hold a major event in Greece during the bicentennial under COVID conditions, and the success. We know that the convention was a success. I thought that I would describe the convention as a success even before it started, because it was such a wonderful gesture of solidarity with Greece, of commitment of AHEPA to its Hellenic roots. I'm sure it was very difficult organizationally to have the conference take place under COVID conditions, but I think when historians will write the 200th anniversary history of AHEPA, they will look back on the 2021 convention as one of the high points of the order of AHEPA. That is my overview of those 10 decades: adaptability, multitasking, setting the standard, and openness with other organizations.
Alexander, thank you so much for that. Just a couple of points I want to make. In terms of the Greek war effort and the low profile that the Skouras and others were taking, don't forget at the time, they had to take a low profile because in many cases they were shipping supplies into Greece through Turkey. Okay, in other words, people don't realize, and again, Skouras was a member of AHEPA, of course, but they saved tens of thousands of lives during that period. They had to have, to a certain degree, a profile. They didn't want people to know what they're doing. What you indicated was absolutely correct in terms of the archives. Archives are very important, and I'm honored, quite frankly. Within the last week and a half, I think I mentioned it to everyone earlier, that I was given by Chris Vournas, the family archives, actually, of George Vournas, who's one of the most significant AHEPA Supreme Presidents. He was, of course, the Supreme President of AHEPA from 1942 to 1945. Costa, can you bring up the photo for a second? Okay, Major Vournas was involved, obviously, with the war bond effort, and at the time he was attached to the War Finance Division of the Treasury Department. Brother Jimmy indicated earlier all the money that was raised during that period by AHEPA, and at the time, Major George Bournas was the Supreme President, and he was behind the AHEPA war bond effort in the United States when he was the Supreme President of the organization. He was a major of the OSS branch of the Army during World War II, and he was actually stationed at the White House, working with his close personal friend, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a fellow AHEPA, as we indicated earlier, from 1931, when he became the President of the United States. This particular photo, by the way, is from 1934. I think FDR was the president for about a year. Bournas is on the left-hand side. Bournas also worked diligently, and it was mentioned by Basil, along with others, with the Junior Order of AHEPA, the Sons of Pericles, to attract and recruit them into the military, into key positions during World War II, and individuals who had both English and Hellenic language skills to serve in the famous 122, the Greek 122nd Greek battalion, which included Major Peter Kleinos, who was a member of the Sons of Pericles in that battalion and a West Point graduate. For those who don't understand why it was called the 122nd battalion or division, that's because, Roosevelt did it on purpose. It was actually the 122nd anniversary of the Greek Revolution, and they decided to call the battalion that. You mentioned the archives in Minnesota and Washington. And one of the great things that AHEPA can do, in fact, has to do with a recent huge movement that's taking place both in Greece and in the United States. It's appeared in papers. There's been meetings with the Prime Minister within the last few weeks, the President of the Hellenic Republic. And that has to do, Alexander, with two of our friends, Professor Gonda Van Steen and Professor Mary Kardaris, who have created this thing called Nostos for Greek-born adoptees, which has to do with them connecting and becoming and pushing them to become citizens within Greece. I don't know if AHEPA has any archives or personal records of these adoptees. There was about 4,000 of them who were sent abroad from Greece for adoption during the 1950s and 1960s. I don't know if AHEPA has any records on this, but any records that exist on these adoptees and their history, etc., that AHEPA has would be tremendous in my opinion for AHEPA, because this is, again, a huge movement that's taking place. Thank you, Alexander, for the presentation. Brother Jimmy, you have been everywhere in the last few weeks and months, and I quite frankly don't know how you do it. If you can tell us some of the activities that are taking place, have taken place, and are taking place around this 100th anniversary, which will culminate again in Florida in July. If you can go through that, it would be really great.
Yes, so thank you, Lou, and thank you, Dr. Kitroeff, again for the fine work. Just to touch on what you just said, Lou, a second ago, also with the young children, and I had the pleasure of meeting Gonda in person.
Great. No,
this again goes back to what Dr. Kitroeff said. We don't advertise a lot of stuff. I met with her in Athens during the convention. She told me what she was working on. We started the conversation in some of our visitations. I, as vice president, started the conversation there with some of the elected officials that we met in Greece, some of the politicians, the Greek politicians. So I know it's gotten traction now. We like to think that we helped get a little bit of that traction going in the summer by bringing it up to people. It's something it's very near and dear to many people's hearts that these children are Greek and of Greek descent, looking for their citizenship. And Gonda's done great work, to do this. And as I pointed out, so one of the biggest problems I think that we face and the hurdles that we have to overcome is when they do this to help these people out that are deserving. I think one of the fears of the Greek government is how do they keep it from being used by other people to then claim citizenship and say, something, we're also Greek citizens. So how do we keep the bad people from taking advantage of doing something good and trying to help these other people out? So again, that's one of the things.
Jimmy, I have to say, you have to be congratulated for that, because you've taken an initiative and quite frankly, this is what Professor Alexander Kitroeff was talking about, where AHEPA, again, it's not known what exactly they do, but they take certain initiatives. And I'm really glad to hear that, because I met with Gonda also myself in Athens, quite frankly. And,
Yep.
and more recently, she actually met with the president of the Hellenic Republic and the prime minister's people. And again, we can announce it here, but they're working with the Hellenic government to actually do something legally to help these adoptees. And I'm so glad, again, AHEPA is taking the lead on this particular thing.
So yeah, again, we're everywhere and anywhere that we can help. Again, it's a service organization. Sometimes I don't know if people will agree with it, but it's not the appropriate term or the scholastic term to use. But we're suckers, and we to help. We're suckers for a good cause.
You're not suckers. You're amazing. You're amazing,
Yes,
Jimmy. I don't know how you do it. Can you tell us what you've been doing and what's happening as we head towards July?
So we're getting ready for this. We're getting ready for our 100th. And as Dr. Kitroeff said, we were the only organization to be in Greece last summer, as you were with us there, Lou. And I got to tell you, there were a lot of people that were scared to go, and we would have had thousands more people there with us. But again, thinking of the big picture, we did not want to, God forbid, cancel, because we know it would have probably caused Greece tens of thousands of other people going to Greece if they heard AHEPA was backing out of their convention. They would have thought something really horrible was going on. It was wonderful that the convention was great, and we were happy to support. We're trying to gather the troops, Lou. We're trying to put together a wonderful convention in Orlando. And Basil was underestimating it too. We know that we're going to have anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people there. When you add in the delegates with their family members, with their children and their grandchildren. Lobbying Dr. Kitroeff, we don't officially lobby. We're advocates on behalf of Greece and the Patriarchate in Cyprus.
Non-political.
Not political. We love everybody that'll work with us for the good of Greece and the Patriarchate in Cyprus the same. And the people that don't want to do that, we love them too and welcome them in as well. We were in Greece pointing this out, letting them know that we're fighting for them and we're on their side. Unfortunately, we're not going to free Cyprus anytime soon, given what's going on in the world. But since the Hellenic Caucus was formed and through the strength of our chapters, nothing bad has happened and continued to get worse. As Representative Raptakis and Bilirakis, just with the bill they put forward a few months ago, in relation to selling of arms and certain arms to Turkey, they were able to quash that also. So again, we're just trying to bring attention to the 100 years of service in Orlando, honor the people that came before us, honor their great contributions, and kind of try to motivate our youth to join us in this service of the diaspora into the Greeks. It'll be a wonderful convention. It'll be filled with a bunch of great speakers and some enjoyment and partying at Disney World. We'll be in Atlanta before that. I'd like to point that out. We'll be in Atlanta at the end of June, which was the birthplace of the organization. And we'll be celebrating there. We've got a 100-year celebration coming up we're in the talks, Lou, for New York. I've put it out there that I'll go and celebrate any district's contributions to our organization. And wherever we go, we're just in Chicago to celebrate their contributions. It's not, we don't go there to celebrate New York and AHEPA as a whole. We were in Chicago celebrating Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin contributions to the greatness of this organization through 100 years. We were in Tarpon Springs with His Eminence celebrating there before that. We'll be in Charlotte in May. We'll be in Atlanta, as I said. We'll be in Alabama probably in the beginning of September, in California in September as well. So we're going everywhere and anywhere that we can go to celebrate the contributions that those districts had to these 100 years. There's so much history that unfortunately Dr. Kitroeff will never be able to find, because so much of it is word of mouth. But again, we've got governmental meetings scheduled. I'll be going again to Greece the end of this month, Thessaloniki, Greece, Cyprus, Athens, and then again, government meetings. This one's business and pleasure. The pleasure comes at the tail end. We'll be at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for April 10th to do services there. A tour of the Greek religious sites for a couple of days after that. Constantinople right after that with a tour of the School of Chalki and everything going on there. We're looking for some government meetings in Turkey, celebrating Palm Sunday with His All Holiness, and then coming back and then going back a week later with B'nai B'rith and with AHI, official government meetings, presidents, prime ministers, defense ministers, part of the 1+1+1, the 3 democracies of the Eastern Mediterranean, strengthening our ties, helping each other and showing that there is strength in numbers and that these democracies are working together for unity, for health, for freedom of their people, and trying to lead by example. We've got other countries that have joined that 1+1+1, and that's what we'll be doing again, end of April, beginning of May. Again, just getting the word out and trying to continue to advocate on behalf of Greece, Cyprus, and the Patriarchate.
Thank you, Jimmy. Can you guys unmute each other? Or, Alexander, Nick, can you unmute yourself so we can have just open discussions?
Yes,
it was
yes.
discussed. It was discussed earlier. It was discussed earlier that about the how AHEPA took off initially. Part of the reason why they took off is, don't forget, at that time they were considered the other, and what they wanted to do was make people understand. And don't forget, this was the 1920s, the worst time period in terms of immigration and in terms of discrimination. They wanted Americans to realize that they themselves were Americans, and they proceeded to do that by teaching English to people, by working with people, Hellenic Americans, to become citizens and all the rest of that, so they can demonstrate to the Americans, let's say, that they themselves were Americans. And there were other organizations at the time, as we know, Alexander, and you call one of them was GAPA, obviously, which had a completely different scenario, different thought process. And their thought process was to stay culturally Greek, to speak Greek, and in fact go back to Greece. And they did not survive. They did not survive. Yeah. And AHEPA did survive by that strategy. But as we went, Alexander and Nico and Jimmy, as we went now into the 20th and 21st century, we see AHEPA sort of like changing to a certain degree. And as you said, Alexander, to really come to grips with what's happening and actually mold itself into the future. And that future, and Jimmy or Alexander or Nico, you can talk about it, but that future is basically to bring back some of the Hellenism, to bring back to people to speak the Hellenic language again, which I know AHEPA has been helping in terms of churches, in terms of schools, in terms of all the different activities. Can you speak to that issue, anyone?
I think also, if we read the history more carefully, we see that although it was an emphasis in Americanization in the early years, they also opened afternoon schools. So it is misleading that what people thought that AHEPA only focuses.
But that was the propaganda, as you know, at the time, Nico. That was the propaganda. Yeah. That was absolutely propaganda.
They also started.
But speak to what AHEPA is doing now with regards to all those issues and how they're taking the leadership role with regards to not only Hellenism, which is universal, but also the Hellenic language, the Hellenic culture, and things of that nature. That basically our organizational structure has collapsed, except for AHEPA. Alexander.
Wow, that's a challenge. But the term is Greek American, so it's you're Americans of Hellenic descent or heritage or whatever you like to put it. And that was an identity that evolved and developed throughout. And I can understand GAPA's concerns back then, but I think they didn't realize that the identity has two parts to it. It's got a Hellenic background and an American presence and future. And that's what AHEPA was able to do. But the interesting thing is AHEPA's evolution, because in a sense, the more American it becomes more interested in its Hellenic roots and heritage, which is
exactly right.
It's difficult somehow for outsiders to understand. It's a very American thing because America legitimizes ethnic heritage, and people maybe who are not familiar with those dynamics are very surprised with this. And so I see this return, the return in the bicentennial was Americans honoring their heritage in a way that other organizations were either unable to or unwilling to, or couldn't conceive of that at all. So it's this wonderful duality of identity and heritage, of Americanism and Hellenism. And it sounds like a kind of public relations cliche for AHEPA, what I'm describing, but it is at the core of this identity. It's got two sides to it.
Not only that, and you've been involved in it recently. You know, I did the first. Most people don't know this, but I did the first Hellenic American genealogy conference about 6 years ago. It was it was the first time it was ever done nationally, by the way. And one thing that fascinated me is when I was talking to the people, and you talked about it recently, Alexander. One of the things that fascinated me was people that were there flying in from all over the country. I think there was about 300 some odd people from all over the United States and also Canada. And the fascinating thing were people who had just a small part of their background and heritage as being Hellenic. It could have been the grandfather or a grandmother. They didn't have Hellenic names at all. And their discovering their Hellenism was something that was so powerful to them that quite frankly, and for AHEPA, I think this has not been tapped into. All these things with genealogy, etc., has not been tapped into. And I think there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people who actually would love to find out more about AHEPA, join AHEPA, and as a matter of fact, realize their Hellenism. Now, Jimmy, you are a product of spreading the word. Tell us a little bit about that Hellenism that's within you and that language aspects and all these things we talked about in terms of the 21st century of AHEPA.
So Lou, growing up in Brooklyn, going to Sunday school, going to afternoon Greek school, being an altar boy, I lived it all. I felt it all. I was blessed. It's so you see these pictures from 100 years ago and from 80 years ago. And you see the people, whether it's on the Coney Island boardwalk or someplace else, and they're wearing their suit, and you almost can't tell who the rich person is and who the regular person is, the working class person is, because they're all wearing their suits, and there was a certain level of class and elegance. And maybe you could tell if you were standing next to them the quality of the suit, but they're wearing their suit with their pride and with their dignity. And this is what our immigrant fathers and grandparents had. They had that dignity and that love and that self-respect for themselves. Whether they had a lot in their pockets didn't make a difference. They had their faith. In this country, they found their freedom, and they knew that their families had a future. And I feel it, and I try to spread that word. And what you said, as we helped Greeks become Americans 100 years ago, I can't tell you how many Greek Americans, second, third, fourth generation, we're helping now to make them and feel more their Greek roots. It's the reverse. Back then, we're helping the Greeks become Americans. Now you're having somebody come up to you and say, you know something, my grandfather was Greek. I don't know much about anything other than my grandfather was Greek. And we're getting these people to go to church because they're joining AHEPA groups, chapters, and participate in events. I've had papadas walk up to me and say, "Posto gataferes afton and ertes στην εκκλησία, εγώ το παρακαλούσα." And it was just a level of comfort, or I guess security, that they feel showing up with their AHEPA brothers for an event. And now they're going to church, or somebody's son-in-law won't show up to church, and they're a Phil-Hellene, but they're not Greek at all. And now they show up with their brothers, and that person shows up with his wife, and the wife is like, I've been trying to get him here. You don't know how happy my parents are to feel it. And it's also, I think, it explains the growth we've had in Europe. Up 20% in Greece alone this past year. I think the Greeks in their own country are feeling a little bit of a change. And I think it's awkward to them. For us, we came here and we were the minority from day one as Greeks in America. The Greeks now, I think, in Greece, with so many other ethnic groups moving into Greece, are seeing that it's becoming a little bit more difficult. They're not the majority, but they're not, it's not just about Greece anymore. It's other groups coming in. And I think they're feeling that, and they want to attach themselves to us and to that promotion of the values of Hellenism. And again, the Greek and American combination. And that's one of the reasons we've had the growth. And in Europe, the chapters that we've started the last couple of years, these people are moving to other countries in Europe for business, and they want to meet with fellow Greeks. They want to have that cafenio environment that they had in their patria, to be able to sit with somebody that shares the same values, the same beliefs. And it's getting people to start chapters all over Europe because they want to be able to get together once a month and feel what they felt back home. So that yearning for people of acceptance, of value, of significance, of contribution. And again, as Dr. Kitroeff said, we don't have a small scope of help. The chance of me meeting Ganda was slim to none. Craig Theros introduced us, and I love the story. I'm like, how can we not help? We're going to be meeting with political figures anyway. Why would I not be willing to share this story and see what could be done to help her? And it just goes back to the service organization we are and what we've done, advocating not only for Greece, Cyprus, and the Patriarchate, but advocating on behalf of anybody that we can help. And sometimes it takes so little on our end to help somebody else. And it's a great example, again, for our children and future generations to get involved and be part of something bigger than themselves. The other thing that I just want to touch on that Dr. Kitroeff mentioned, we are the only organization that survived 100 years, putting ourselves second as individuals. Nobody in this organization does anything that they do. I don't do anything and say, here's Jimmy Kokotas' business card, okay? This is the order of AHEPA. We advocate, we help, we do. We're not a somatio, and we don't put anything against the somatia, but the somatia are regional. We are the only ones out there advocating with no benefit to ourselves. It's not, there is no benefit to ourselves, to our personal pockets, to our personal lives, to help Greece, to help Cyprus, to help the Patriarchate. This is why I think we've survived, and how I've said in the past, you come out of this organization better than you went into it, because too much of today's society is about ourselves, and that self-gratification and quick gratification. In this organization, you put yourself second, you put the organization and its values, its issues, and what it's advocating for first. And that is a lesson, a humbling lesson, but a very valuable lesson, a lesson that's deeply rooted in our faith. And again, it goes back to what we said earlier. The people under Turkish rule for almost 400 years sacrificed everything for the faith and for the culture, for the language, to survive. They gave themselves up for that to survive. The Greeks did it again in 1940. They gave themselves up for it to survive. We don't do it at that level, but we give up of ourselves for the good of the greater diaspora and honoring our forefathers by helping and putting Greece, Cyprus, the Patriarchate, and the endeavors that we support first, and ourselves personally second.
Thank you, Brother Jimmy. We're going to wrap it up now. Nico, some final words.
Well, one is that it's a good time to mention that we have a fundraising this coming Tuesday. So
I'll mention it at the end, Nico. Some final words on AHEPA.
Since we're talking about the compatibility between the church and Greek values, Alexander, I just got your book on the Greek Church in America, and I haven't read it yet. But I know from research that initially the Patriarchy gave the responsibility to the Church of Greece to organize the church in America, and it took them 10 years. From 1908 to 1918, somebody came to start organizing. Then we have the 100-year anniversary in 1922. But from my understanding is that is this compatible with the Greek values, since the Patriarchy is moving or has an ideology more for orthodoxy rather than Greekness? How you think that will be a competition or some kind of challenge within the compatibility, as you said, and adaptability between AHEPA and the Church in America?
I will say, Nico, I'll jump in there before you do the final words, Alexander. Let me just jump in myself. For those who don't really understand the history of the church in the United States, the Greek Orthodox Church, we were actually under the Russian Orthodox Church in the beginning because there was no recognition of the Greek Orthodox Church. But in fact, the Russian Orthodox Church had recognition by the U.S. government. Part of the scenario, Nico, between Greece and the Patriarchate, etc., where some of the original priests, etc., were out of the church in Greece. Don't forget that this was the time period that we had the Venizelos Vasilias controversy and conflict and schism within the community. And that was part of the reason why it went back to a certain degree to the Patriarchate in Constantinople. You can respond to Nico's question, Alexander, but I want you also to do some closing remarks regarding this particular session. But I do want to have another session with you on the 100th anniversary of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. Yes.
Good. That might be the place where we can discuss Nico's excellent point further. But just briefly, I think if the Ecumenical Patriarchate is taking a position which addresses global Hellenism, then AHEPA fits into that model very well, and the Greek Americans see themselves as part of a Hellenic whole. Then I think there's the compatibility between the Church and AHEPA will continue. In terms of closing remarks, I wanted to pick up on just to say, as I was reading the stuff in AHEPA's headquarters, I remember opening up my first yearbook, and I was looking and I saw, okay, this is an organization. It has the reports of all the officers of the organization. And then I get to a section where the president describes his travels throughout the year, and it's 2-3 pages of continuous visits to chapters all over the United States, which is unique. It's stunning, the work that the presidents put in, which reminds us, I think, that AHEPA is not just the main organization, but all the chapters have their own particular history, their own life, and I think maybe they're not celebrating the 100th anniversary this year, but by AHEPA commemorating its centenary, I think and reflecting on its history should inspire the chapters to take it upon themselves to tell their own stories and tell the stories of how they've contributed to AHEPA, because it's really an organization that has relied so much on its chapters. The Greek bicentennial was a celebration of many achievements last year, and there's nothing wrong in a commemoration being a celebration. I think people were saying, let's look critically back onto Greek history, but let's look at the positive aspects. And I think AHEPA's centenary I see it as the same thing. Let's obviously look at the whole history and look at it thoughtfully and critically, but overall, it's an occasion to celebrate and to be inspired from what is really an extraordinary historical trajectory of 100 years with the momentum there for the next 100.
Thank you, Alexander, for that. Brother Jimmy, if you can, some closing remarks regarding AHEPA and the 100 years.
Lou, yes. I just invite everybody to celebrate their history, celebrate it with us if they can, but let us not forget where we come from. Let us not forget that America was nothing without all these different ethnic backgrounds, these different people that came to it and contributed to its fabric and to what it is today. There's so much talk about a homogeneous society, and I think we can't lose the roots. We can't lose what makes us different. Let us bring different things to the table respectfully, because we've all contributed something to this beautiful country and to the world. Let us hold on to those roots, to those values, to the faith, to the language, to the culture. Let us preserve them. Let us protect them. Let us give them forward to our children and grandchildren. It's a special year. Let us accept that we're different, and everybody's different. Different but beautiful. Different and in our own way, whatever little chodyo we come from, whatever town we come from, let us honor those people that suffered and sacrificed so much to get us here today, for the freedoms that we have, for all the beautiful things that we have in our lives. And there's no greater way to do it than to maintain the Greekness and to keep it. I'm going to finish with Father Eugene Pappas, our priest at Three Harricks Church, one of his greatest sermons. He talked about how we have given away more in the last 20 or 30 years than the Turks took from us in 400 years. Let us not fall victim to being that frog in the pot of cold water where the temperature goes up a couple of degrees at a time and it gets boiled. Let us realize what's going on around us sometimes and jump out of that pot before we become victim and give up some beautiful things that we really shouldn't. So again, Lou, thank you. Thank you for your passion, for your Greekness, and for your love of both countries. And thank you to Dr. Kitroeff, Dr. Alexiou, and everybody else that was with us today to keep us relevant, keeping ourselves relevant and shining the spotlight on ourselves once in a while, because the way the world is going, nobody else is going to shine it on us if we don't do it ourselves. So every once in a while, we got to toot our own horn and be proud of everything that we've done. Let us keep God first in our faith, our freedoms, our family, and knowing that our future with the faith and the freedom and our families will be beautiful, just the way like that our ancestors were in the same position at some point or another and survived on those same values. I thank you, Lou, for having me, and I thank you for your great work.
I thank all of you. This was a fantastic panel discussion relating to the 100th year anniversary. I will say a couple of things. We are having an event together. For those who don't know, I've helped sponsor the Onassis play, which is playing off Broadway. And on Tuesday, we're having a special charity benefit performance. This is EMBCA with AHEPA, and it's a charity performance, and all the proceeds are going to two charities. One of them is it has to do with the Greek division of Ronald McDonald House, which supports cancer and students. The other one is the Hellenic American Project at Queens College, which Professor Alexiou is the director of. And again, all the proceeds by AHEPA and by EMBCA, all the proceeds of that particular event are going to those particular charities. So we ask you to find out about the play. It's a fantastic play, by the way. And many people may regard Onassis as being about toxic masculinity. But when you see this play, you will be absolutely amazed at the way it's structured and how it actually links itself to what happened in his life based on the destruction of Smyrna or the burning of Smyrna in 1922. And again, this is the 100th anniversary of that. On March 27th, 2 weeks from now, we're going to have another event that's called the Revolution of 1821, American Philhellenes Holy Ground in Agios Ioannis in Argos, Greece. We're going to have the mayor of Argos. And don't forget, Argos is the oldest continually occupied city in all of Europe and one of the oldest cities in the world. And for those who don't know and why we're having this event is because two Philhellenes, two Americans who fought in the Revolution of 1821 are buried in the courtyard of that particular church. They include George Jarvis, the first American, the famous American who went to Greece to fight in the revolution, fought and died there. And the African-American slave from Baltimore, James Williams, who also was in the Greek Navy, fought and died and is buried there. EMBCA, myself included, we are having professors and people to discuss those particular individuals. And we also have hired a firm, because they don't exactly know where they're buried. we hired a firm actually to do a ground penetration survey to see where people are buried on the grounds, because we have to find out where these Americans and other people who are buried there are, because we will never leave anyone behind. As the military says, we will never leave anybody behind. And AHEPA and EMBCA will not leave any American behind, especially Americans who fought in the Revolution of 1821. So we ask people to join us in that event. For those who want to know more about AHEPA, it's ahepa.org on the internet. For those who want to know more about EMBCA, it's EMBCA.com. Thank you. You were terrific today in describing this organization that doesn't do enough, in my opinion, as Alexander said, to really promote itself and to make people understand who they actually are, what they've actually done over those 100 years. It's amazing what they've done, actually. Costa, what I'd like you to do is finish with that video relating to AHEPA. And again, to the audience, thank you very much. Costa, if you can play that video. We'll take a couple of seconds to bring it up, but I think it's very important to see that video again. Is it okay, Costa?
Yes, give me a second.
Okay. Thank you, guys. It was
Thank you, Lou.
absolutely.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Kitroeff, Dr. Alexiou. Thank you
Jimmy.
very much. Nasti kala. Thank you.
Yes,
Jimmy.
Hola, Kala. Thank you.
Πολύ ωραία.
Let's wait for the video and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you to the audience.
Thank you.
Πολύ ωραία.
Let's wait for the video and then
For we're a nation of community,
Thank you.
regional and other organizations, all of them varied, voluntary, and unique. The Order of AHEPA.
The American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association.
For we're a nation of community, regional and other organizations, all of them varied, voluntary, and unique.
Speak to your doctor.
The Order of
The
AHEPA.
American Hellenic
These
Educational
service dogs are
Progressive
actually trained rescue
Association.
dogs.
For we're a nation of
We're
community,
saving one life to save another.
regional and other organizations, all of them varied, voluntary, and unique.
Speak to your doctor.
The Order of
The
AHEPA.
American Hellenic
These
Educational
service dogs are
Progressive
actually trained rescue
Association.
dogs.
For we're a nation of
We're
community,
saving one life to save another.
regional and other organizations, all of them varied, voluntary, and unique.
Speak to your
The
doctor.
Order of AHEPA.
The American Hellenic
These
Educational
service dogs are
Progressive
actually trained rescue
Association.
dogs.
For we're a nation of
We're
community,
saving one life to save another.
regional and other organizations, all of them varied, voluntary, and unique.
Speak to your
The
doctor.
Order.
Thank you all. Thank you all.